Hey, Jacob, thanks for reaching out to me. I'm happy to do this interview for your YouTube channel called Jacob Lenhoff Tours America. My name is Eugene L. Hayman Jr., and I've written a novel called Where Madmen Rule. And I'm here to answer some questions about it for Jacob. Thanks for reaching out, Jacob. I appreciate the opportunity. Jacob's first question to me is, how did I become a writer? Well, the simple answer to that is I became a writer by writing. There's an old saying in the writer community: writers write. If you're a writer, you're writing. If you're not writing, you're not a writer. But I don't think that's exactly what he meant. More to the point, I can mark the moment pretty precisely when I actually became a functioning writer. I had already decided that I wanted to write a novel because there was so much basically crap out there, and every time I read one of those, I think I know I can do better than that. And so I had started writing. I was trying to write the first chapter, and I would write the chapter, and then I would read it. It's like, oh, okay, this is pretty good. And then I would let it cool for an hour or a day or something, and then I would read it again, and I would be like, oh my God, this is crap. This is pure crap. And I kept doing that. I'd delete the chapter, and then I'd start over again, write it from scratch. And I did that, oh, I don't know, a dozen times. And finally it occurred to me, I said, what if I take this one version, which has some pretty good parts in it, but then it's got a bunch of crap in there, and I rewrote it. I rewrote the bad parts and kept the good parts. And it's like a light bulb went off, ding! And I think that's when I became an actual writer. Because there's another saying in the writing community that I didn't know at the time, but I've since learned. And that saying is, writing is rewriting. Nobody just sits down and bats one out of the park first time up on at the plate. What you have to do is you write, and then you edit, and then you rewrite, and then you edit again, and you do that. It's like combing knots out of some tangled hair. You know, you have to just keep combing it and combing it until you like it. And then in the end, a lot of times you end up trashing it anyway. But that's the process. So that's how I became a writer. So Jacob, next question to me is, how did I get into science fiction stories? That's a pretty straightforward answer right there. It happened in the school year 1961, 1962 at elementary school where I went. As second graders, we were allowed to go to the library, right? And I found this book called Peter and the Rocket Ship. And it was about a little boy who accidentally stowed away on a rocket ship. I think his dad was an astronaut or something, and he fell into a crate or something like that. And then he ends up blasting off with everybody. And he's in outer space and he floats around. He's weightless, you know, and then he makes a globule of water that floats around it like it does in microgravity. And I was so engaged by that little book, I must have read it 10 times. And I think there was even a sequel to it, Peter and the Rocket Ship 2 or something. And once again, he stows away on a rocket ship. And I guess that's before NASA, you know, tightened up their security protocols or something. But anyway, I was so engaged by those stories that I sought out some other ones about space and bug-eyed monsters and all that, and I became a lifelong science fiction fan. So that's the answer to that question. All right, question three is, who is my favorite fantasy author? Uh, I personally am not a fan of the fantasy genre. I'm pretty much a hard sci-fi guy. The closest I've come to a fantasy novel that I enjoyed was I don't know if you consider it a fantasy novel, uh, but it has some of the characteristics, and that's Robert Heinlein's book Glory Road, where the hero goes on a quest and there's a princess and stuff. But Heinlein does a good job with it. That's the closest I've come to enjoying something that would be considered fantasy. I mean, I've read J.R. Tolkien, and I'm not a big fan. I mean, I know that puts me in a kind of a minority. A lot of people love the guy, but you know, a lot of this sword and dragon stuff, it doesn't move along very well. They get caught up, I think, in my opinion, they get caught up in the antiquated language and the magic and this and that. But a fantasy novel can be good if it follows the general rules of a good story. Uh, a story that follows those rules is going to be good regardless of genre. That's what I'm saying. And those rules are, well, there's a lot of them. If you're thinking of trying to write something, the very first thing I would advise you to do is go to YouTube and listen to some videos by a guy named Michael Hague, Hauge. He really lays it out. Like one thing uh, is there's what he says is there are four basic emotions. Now, you can monkey with that quite a bit, but the four basic ones are mad, glad, sad, and afraid. All right. So the way it works is in a scene. If a character starts out feeling one of those emotions, say he starts at the scene opens and he's angry. Oh gosh, dog it, I'm angry, and then at the end of the scene or the chapter, if he's still angry, with it, you haven't really progressed. He could have said, "Oh, I'm angry," one sentence and boom, that's done. What moves the plot along is if things change in a scene. So if the guy or girl starts out angry, then at the end, by the end of that scene, they should be one of the other four emotions: uh, glad, sad, or afraid. So that process is what moves the plot along. Every scene, every chapter, the character has to develop. If you're no different at the beginning of an experience that you have in life or in a story, then what's the point of even having the experience? If you're sad when you start out and then you're sad at the end, well, you haven't really progressed. You haven't learned anything. Uh, too many of the Dungeon and Dragon or fantasy novels, in my opinion, they don't really do that. They don't progress. They just this dark foreboding thing all the way through. One chapter, then oh, we're sad again. And we're still sad. Oh, good Lord! At the end of the hobby, we're sadder than ever. So I don't like that. So that's why I'm not much of a fantasy fan. But I'm sure there's some good fantasy stories out there, and I probably just haven't encountered them. So that's the answer to that question. Okay, so Jacob's next question for me is what is my favorite Stephen King novel and why? First, I'm going to start out by committing a apostasy. I really don't consider myself a big Stephen King fan, because mainly because I don't like horror. I can remember going to see some movie a long time ago. Maybe it was Aliens or something. And I mean, that's a good movie. It made a lot of money, and a lot of people like it. But I remember sitting there, and it's just like, I'm terrified. And I get out of there, I'm like, I'm sick to my stomach. I'm so terrified. I remember watching aliens eat everybody, and I'm like, I paid good money to go be terrified. So I'm not a fan of being terrified. So that's why. But then I discovered fairly recently, a few years ago, that I actually am a fan of Stephen King, and I just didn't know it. I liked the of course Carrie, but one thing I didn't like about that is, like I said previously, it ends sadly. She's sad in the beginning. She's all that bad stuff, her crazy mother and everybody tortured at school, and at the end, oh, she dies and goes down the hill or something. I don't know. That was I prefer a happy ending, but that was an engaging story. It kept you interested. And then the Shawshank Redemption. I didn't know Stephen King had anything to do with that. That's a pretty good story, but there were some parts of that I didn't like. It's pretty dark. I mean, prison rape and crawling through sewage and stuff. Not a big fan, dude. So, Stephen King is an excellent writer. And if you haven't read his book, I think it's called Stephen King on Writing. It's not a novel. He just talks about how he became a writer and how he writes and everything. It's an excellent book. I've read it. He's a skilled writer. So God bless him. Once again, I'm just not a fan of having the doo-doo scared out of me. So let's see what else. That's it. That's okay. That's the answer to that question. Okay, the next question is what author would I love to meet and why? Well, uh, since I just trashed Stephen King, I'll come back now and say I'd love to meet the guy. I'd love to, pick his brain about how he writes. Even though he laid a lot of it out in his novel, I'd love to meet him. Uh, and essentially, I'd love to meet any writer who's been successful and written some good stuff, and find out how they did it, and maybe make me a better writer. But I don't guess that's exactly what you meant. The ones I would really like to meet, I'm going to have to wait until I die too, because they're dead. One of them, of course, is Robert Heinlein. He was always my favorite when I was younger, and Bob Heinlein, he has some issues, in today's stuff. Look, a lot of his stuff is misogynistic, and he's kind of a racist, and a homophobe and stuff. But you kind of have to cut him some slack, the same kind of slack you cut Mark Twain, for a novel with a main character named Negro Jim, except he didn't say Negro. You have to cut him a little bit of slack for that. I guess I'd like to meet Mark Twain too. But let's see, another one is John D. McDonald, his Travis McGee series. Now I've read some of his other stuff. It's not, in my opinion, it's not that good. But the Travis McGee series, I like those. They're a little bit formulaic, but they're engaging. If you don't read too many of them in a row, if you read too many of them in a row, everyone is the same. So read one, wait a little while, read another one. And I'll give you a hint, ladies. If you're a lady and you meet Travis McGee, you don't get to be his girlfriend, because boy, every novel is. This is the one. This is one. Something bad always happens to her. Very sad. But let's see. Okay, Robert Heinlein is one I'd really like to meet most of all, because his stories, the good ones, he wrote some poor ones, but his good ones, when he was in his prime, they all do the same thing. They draw you in immediately, and they keep you engaged. From one scene to the next. Oh, what's going to happen next? How are they going to get out of this one? And I always wondered how he did that. And I thought about it. I never could figure it out. But now I think recently, having done some more research on writing and stuff, it's because his good stories followed a plot line called the hero's journey. It's a plot line, and it's a map for character development. If you are thinking of being a writer, screenwriter, author, whatever, you should familiarize yourself definitely with the hero's journey. The guy who came up with it, I can't remember his name. Just Google it; 1,000 things will come up, and it's an effective what would you call it, map, because it follows reality for human beings. Like say somebody comes along to me and they go, "Hey, Gene, we want you to go on this adventure. People are going to be trying to kill you, and if everything goes wrong, the whole world's going to be destroyed." I'm like, "What? No, not me." Well, see, that's the way. That's real. Nobody would be like, "Oh, sure, put me in danger." So in the hero's journey, the main character, the hero, they always start out by refusing to go on the quest. And if you're looking for that, you'll see it in episodes of Monk. Monk always, "Oh, no, I don't want to do this one." And somehow he gets talked into it, or somehow he gets forced in it. Every good story, the character first, just as any real person would, is like, no, I'm going to pass on this one, man. It's too dangerous. And then something happens that forces him to go into the other world. First there's a what they call a herald cry, a clarion call. And it could be a newspaper article or a dream or something the character learns. My favorite example is in Gone with the Wind. Scarlett O'Hara is just this, airheaded little debutante or whatever. And then after she has the scene with Rhett Butler, the first one in the mansion where they're at the party, and then you hear that the writer comes galloping up to the mansion, and he's going, "War, it's war, it's war." Well, that's the herald cry. And that's the moment when everything changes, man. There's no going back. And every good story has one of those moments. And the main character, of course, Scarlett didn't want to do that. She tried throughout the novel, and the main character has to refuse repeatedly to go on the quest. Maybe just once, but sometimes many times, right to the end. And then finally they have to go on the quest. Let's see what else I have to. Uh, okay, and that leads into the next question, question 6, and actually question 7. His question 6 was, who do I think's better, Spielberg or Cameron? Well, I'm going to tie those guys for first place. Spielberg for Star Wars, because that is like the archetypal example of a story that's built around the hero's journey. And then the next one, Cameron, uh, he did Terminator, both Terminators, all three. The third one doesn't really count, but the first one, that one follows the hero's journey precisely. Like Sarah Connor, uh, first, she doesn't want to have anything to do with this Terminator crap, you know. And then she's forced to go, you know, and he tries to kill her. And it's like, well, you're either going on the quest or you're going to lay here and die, chick. And she goes. But then there's a really good scene in that where, you know, one part of the character development is at some point that in the hero's journey, at some point the hero has to accept their new role. You know, you have to become the hero. You know, you don't have a choice. And that moment occurs for Sarah Connor when uh, they're in the warehouse and they've already blown up the Terminator and burned all the skin off of him, and now he's a robot and he's still coming. You know, and they're in the warehouse, the machine shop, whatever it is, and Reese is down there unconscious. He can't get up. He's like, oh, without me, you know. And here's you know, Schwarzenegger robot banging on there. Boom, boom. He's gonna kill everybody. You know, they've got about 30 seconds. 10 seconds. You know, and she's going, Reese, get up, honey, please, get up. And then all of a sudden she looks at the door. She's like, damn it, on your feet, soldier, get up. You know, right, that's me, on your feet. And that reaches Reese, and he gets up. And that at that moment, she changes from, you know, victim to warrior princess, you know, and that change allows her a few minutes later to vanquish the Terminator. Before that, you know, the original Sarah Connor at the beginning of the movie, she would just Peter Pants and the Terminator would have got her. But she goes through all these things, and then she has that transformative experience, and she becomes the hero that she potentially was all along. And every character in the hero's quest has to do that. And really, that's a story of human development in life. You know, at some point you have to stand up. You know, okay, you know, I'm a pilot now. You know, gosh dog it, or I'm a doctor, or I'm a chemical plant operator, and I know what to do. You know, when the shit blows up and stuff. So, anyway, I guess I went rather far afield from that question, but I'm gonna say a tie for Spielberg and Cameron. Anything else? Let's see. Uh, Oh, the other in Star Wars, of course, Luke has a similar moment. It's not as dramatic. It's not as good as that one with Sarah Connor. But you know, when he's flying the jet, he has to do the Death Star, kill it. You know, and he has to allow himself to give into the Force. You know, at that moment, he becomes a true Jedi warrior. You know, he wasn't before, but after that, he is. So that's the hero's journey. That's why I like those two movies, because they follow them precisely. And there's a bunch of good examples out there. I'm not a big fan of Tom Cruise, but that story where he defends the two soldiers and Marines, I forget the name of the damn thing, but that's a good one. It follows the hero's journey precisely. So that's the answer to that question, and some other ones I guess you didn't ask. Okay, Jacob asked me another question, which he characterized as being a little edgy, which I guess it is. The question is, have I ever wanted to write a book about one of my own romantic encounters? And my answer to that question is sadly, no. I wish to hell my life was that interesting, especially my romantic life. Unfortunately, it's pretty damn boring. I can't think of one thing that I would want to write a novel about. So that's a pretty short answer to that question. So the next question is, have I ever had a sad or triumphant moment, or wanted to base a story on that? And he used an example of, you know, a loved one dying or a friend or something like that is for the sad moment. Well, my answer to that question is yes and no, because every person who has ever lived has had those moments of intense sadness and triumph. And furthermore, every story that has ever been told is based on those moments, our own and everyone else's. You know, that's just a part of life. You have these experiences, and that's what literature is about. A story can be based on a personal or a historical event, but for it to be engaging, it has to make the reader feel something. Now, there's a real good book that uh, gets around to mentioning this. It's a good book for a lot of reasons for any writer. If you're a writer, you need to get your hands on a copy of this book too, and it's called the Bestseller Code. And they break it down. And what separates a best-selling novel from an also ran is that the best-selling novels make people feel stuff, emotional stuff. And they make the point. They have a saying in the publishing industry, apparently, which I wasn't aware of until I read that book, but it's counterintuitive. And the saying is, "Sex doesn't sell." And that's just all the publishers know that. If you're writing I mean, if you're going to write a triple X thing, well then, okay, sure, maybe you'll sell a few copies and some, aficionados, let's call them. But it's not going to be a bestseller. You're not going to have a runaway bestseller. But then they tell the story when they were doing their research for this book, the Bestseller Code. 50 Shades of Grey came out, and somebody sent them a copy of that. There's everything breaking all the records, millions and millions of sales, and they're like, explain this. If sex doesn't sell, explain this. And so they're like, well, maybe we were wrong. But then they look at it, and it's like, no, I mean, there's sex in that movie, and some of it's kind of deviant, but that's what caught everybody's attention, I guess. But if you look at the story, it's got this a pattern that all good stories have, where you get the character has a moment of triumph, and then they have a moment of sadness, and then they have a moment of triumph, and then they have a moment of sadness, and that's how the story moves along. And 50 Shades of Grey does that. So it would have been a bestseller even without some of the erotica, let's say. So, yeah, where am I? Anyway, a good novel teaches people about life and about themselves. It makes them feel something, and it helps them understand the larger picture and their own personal picture. So I guess that's the answer to that question. Okay, so I have answered, I believe, all of Jacob's questions, or at least made a pretense of answering them. And so this is the part where I get to hawk my novel and encourage you to go out and buy 10 copies. Give one to all your friends. They make excellent Christmas presents. Seriously, if you're a science fiction fan, give my book, Where Madmen Rule, a read. Give it a read. Now, I'm still learning how to do this Filmora thing to make a video. So at some point here, I'm going to post hopefully, a shot of my new cover. I would hold the book up. Well, I'll hold it up. This is my old cover. So if you see a copy of this, that's the book. But the new cover is. Oh, here it is. Hopefully, I'm cutting and pasting it here so you see it. It's available on Amazon, of course. Soon to have an Audible version, if you can believe that. Actually, this thing has been online for a long time. I put it up there, and I just hoped it would sell itself. This was about 10 years ago. And I kept coming back to, damn, this is a good novel. This thing should be selling. But it turns out marketing is hard. Marketing is very hard. So when you finish writing your novel, that's just, okay, that's phase one, dude. Phase two is just as hard, if not harder, and that's to get it out there where people will buy it. My hat's crooked. Okay, let's see. It's available on Amazon. You get a hard copy. You can get a Kindle. It's on Kindle Unlimited. So if you're on that, it's free to read, essentially, for $10 a month, whatever it is. And like I said, an Audible book. Okay, Jacob, I guess that's a wrap. Thank you for letting me rant here. I appreciate it, bud. I appreciate you for reaching out, and I'm happy to do it. So thanks a lot. Bye, guys. Oh, P.S. If you happen to read my novel and if you happen to like it, please leave me a review on Amazon. Reviews are very important to an author. If you do that, I'll be your friend forever. I'll be very appreciative. We need those reviews, and if you don't do it, I'll be very angry. I'll come to your house in the middle of the night, kick your door down, and just kidding, of course. But I don't know where you live. But anyway, leave me a good review if you like the novel. I appreciate that. Okay, now that's a wrap. Thanks. Bye, guys.